Welcome everybody to the Storytime channel. My name is Steven, and today we have some malicious compliance stories. Our first story of the day is by Onyx Owl. Follow the kids' education plan to the letter? Don't mind if I do. I am a high school teacher. One of the things that teachers deal with are individual education plans, IEPs. An IEP is for a student with disabilities, learning, developmental, etc. An IEP will outline exactly what accommodations a student is entitled to. These are very necessary and very important, legally binding documents which outline a student's disability as it relates to academic performance, and provides accommodations to help the student succeed in school. Common accommodations include may use a calculator on math tests, may have test questions read aloud to him or her, may receive extra time on timed tests, and may take tests in the resource room instead of the academic classroom. It is that last accommodation that is important for the story. If you're unfamiliar, a resource room is the classroom of the special education teacher. While the special education students spend 90% of their day in the same classrooms as other students, they will occasionally return to their special ed teacher's room, the resource room, for things like study hall, homeroom, or to take a test. The special ed teacher assigned to help monitor the student's progress is known as the Teacher of Record, or TOR for short. Billy was one of my students last year. He was a bright, outgoing, and very active student. However, Billy also did have a few learning disabilities that caused him to struggle in class. Because of these disabilities, may take tests and quizzes in the resource room instead of the academic classroom was a very important part of his IEP. This cut down on distractions and was to help Billy concentrate on his test. After about half a year of Billy doing well in class, he unexpectedly failed a test in my class. The TOR, Mrs. Ratched, was really upset that Billy didn't do well on that test. She monitored his grades through our online system, so she knew he failed the test less than 10 minutes after I had graded it. In order to get to the bottom of why, she stopped by my classroom after the students had gone home for the day. "Mr. Onyx, why did Billy fail his test?" "I'm not sure. He normally does well on the tests, but this one seemed to stump him. I'm going to talk to him about it tomorrow." "Did you follow his IEP?" "Yes, I did. I offered to let him take the test in the resource room, but he elected to take it in class since it was not a long test." It should be noted that IEP accommodations are generally elective, meaning that the student can choose not to use a specific accommodation at any given point if he or she does not wish to. This does not stop him or her from using that same accommodation later. The only time an accommodation is mandatory is if the parents request that it be so. It is reflected in the IEP when that happens, but it is exceedingly rare. "But," Mrs. Ratched continued, "Billy's IEP states that he gets time and a half on tests." "I'm aware," I explained. However, this was not a timed test. All students had as much time as they needed. If a student didn't finish during today's class period, they could finish the test tomorrow. All students, including Billy, finished today. "He gets time and a half." "Yes, he does, but as I said, this was not a timed test. There was unlimited time for all students, including Billy." "I'm not going to file a non-compliance report on this, but I want you to know that I expect you, the state expects you, to follow IEPs to the letter. You should not have allowed him to take the test in class. He should have received more time than other students. You dropped the ball on this one, and I expect it not to happen again." Then she stormed out. Now, Billy had chosen to take the test in class, something he very rarely did. I'm not sure why Mrs. Ratched was so incensed that he hadn't taken the test in her room, since it was Billy's decision, but whatever. As for the time, that was a non-issue. You can't give time and a half for unlimited time, so I ignored that complaint. A few weeks later, Billy had a quiz in my class. This was a very short 10-question quiz. Again, Billy elected to stay in my room. Again, sadly, Billy failed the quiz. That triggered round 2 with Mrs. Ratched. "What is wrong with you, Mr. Onyx?" she demanded as she stormed into my room the day the quiz grades were uploaded to our grading system. "Billy should be in my room taking these tests and quizzes." Billy chose not to. I offered him the opportunity to take the quiz in your room, but he chose not to. I cannot force him. I am getting very tired of your disregard of IEPs. I'm going to be filing a non-compliance report with the administration. I knew I had done nothing wrong, so I wasn't worried. As I suspected, the administration dismissed her complaint as being without merit, and I went on my way. Then, about 2 weeks after the complaint was filed and dismissed, I got an updated IEP for Billy. It seems Mrs. Ratched was not happy about Billy failing tests and quizzes when he took them in the academic classroom, as opposed to the resource room. As a result, she called up Billy's parents and, through conference with them, got his IEP changed. Instead of Billy may take tests and quizzes in the resource room, it now read Billy must take tests and quizzes in the resource room under the supervision of the teacher of record. The last 8 words of that mandate caught my eye. Under the supervision of the teacher of record. This meant that, as teacher of record, Mrs. Ratched is now legally mandated to be present in her classroom every time Billy takes a test or quiz. Since special ed has instructional assistants, IA, as well as licensed teachers in the rooms at all times, it's not usually a problem if the teacher of record is out of the room, since an IA will be in there. Nope, not anymore. I was still pissed at Mrs. Ratched for her non-compliance complaint against me, even though it got dismissed. I was also pissed at her making demands of me as if I worked for her. I was following the law, following Billy's IEP, and I would be darned if I was going to let anyone tell me I wasn't. Enter the malicious compliance. Every teacher, including special ed teachers, gets a prep period. These periods are periods in which we do not have a class. I use mine for grading and making copies. Some teachers use them to plan for the extracurricular activities they coach or direct. Mrs. Ratched, I knew, used hers to hang out down the hall in the classroom of her BFF, a biology teacher with the same prep period as her. If a student had a test or quiz to take, it wouldn't be an issue normally. An IA would be in the room, so the teacher of record didn't have to be. Well, except for Billy now. You see, Mrs. Ratched's prep period was the same period in which I had Billy in class. About a week after the new IEP was handed down, I had another quiz in class. Unfortunately for Billy, as I explained to him, his parents and Mrs. Ratched had decided that he had to take quizzes and tests in Mrs. Ratched's room. He wasn't happy, but his IEP was not vague on this point. Knowing Mrs. Ratched wouldn't be in the classroom, I took Billy down to Mrs. Ratched's room myself, having my own IA, who was only in my room because of Billy, watch the class. When I got there, I asked the IA where Mrs. Ratched was. "She's in Miss Bio's teacher's room," she kindly explained. "Alright," I said. "Billy, have a seat and I'll go get Mrs. Ratched." "Mrs. Ratched," I said a few moments later as I got to Miss Bio teacher's room, "Billy needs to take a quiz. We need you down in your room to supervise." "Miss IA is there," she said with a dismissive wave. "She can handle it." "Oh no she can't," I explained with a smile. "You see, I am, as you reminded me, expected to follow Billy's IEP to the letter. His IEP says that he must take tests and quizzes in the resource room under the supervision of the teacher of record. As his teacher of record, I'm afraid that you are required to be there. It would be non-compliance for me to leave the supervision of his quiz up to Miss IA." She looked pissed, but knew that she had backed herself into a corner. Reluctantly, and obviously fuming, she left Miss Bio teacher's room and returned to her room. For the remainder of the year, every test and quiz I assigned to Billy required that Mrs. Ratched give up her prep period in order to supervise. There weren't a lot of them, but I really enjoyed twisting the knife every so often. Just to remind her that it was her actions which forced this. Later, from what I've been told, she tried to get Billy's parents to change the IEP to state may instead of must. They liked the must, they kept it in. This was a really good malicious compliance. That said, do you guys also kind of get the feeling that early on in the story, when Billy was failing the quizzes, OP should have worked a little bit more with Mrs. Ratched on just really heavily suggesting to Billy that they take the tests in the resource room? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Our next story is by Islander XYZ. Traveled 2,000 kilometers to change a light bulb? Okay. A few years ago, I was in a boardroom of an earth-moving company talking to the CEO about how we, my company, could assist with their maintenance cost. Before the meeting, I got all my facts from our guys on the ground. The CEO said, "You are costing us too much to maintain our equipment." I say, "You are in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of a desert. Travel costs are significant, but we can manage if we plan repairs and maintenance to minimize the travel cost." "Well, how about that $10,000 bill to change a broken light last month? Why would you guys charge us and not plan it when the machines are back in range?" I knew this one was coming, so I repeat what my guys told me. See, the owner has decided to put his son through the works to take charge of the company. The CEO decided to send Junior to the middle of nowhere to keep him at bay. Junior decided to use his leverage and ordered a minor repair which was not critical to be carried out. However, the machine was 2,000 kilometers out, so it was a 2-day trip to change a light. My guys asked to confirm whether that was real, if the company wanted to send them to do such a small task, and were told in no such words that they're the client and can do as they want. A purchase order was provided, and the rest was history. I think Junior wanted to give the CEO a taste of how things would be. My guys maliciously complied. I mean, they would be paid overtime, and because it's in the desert, 2 guys have to go. Sat-nav, etc., the works. Back to the story, I say, "We did request confirmation and were told you're the client and provided us with a PO to proceed." So we did. "You shouldn't have proceeded, this is ridiculous." "Your company provided a valid request and refused to listen when told it would be prohibitive. We did warn you about the cost, but the decision is ultimately yours. We can't control your staff." "Who did authorize this work?" "I can send you a copy of the PO." You could see the veins on his head throbbing. Anyway, I heard Junior was moved back to head office shortly after. I'm just worried about that father-son dynamic. I don't know if there's gonna be any repairing after this one goes down. And our final story of the day is by Fear the Cowboy. She demands I drive out to fix her broken terminal twice. Way back in the day, 1992-ish, I worked tech support for a company that handled installations of Unix computers, terminals, software for accounting systems for small organizations. Custom software, check printing, used a special MICR toner in off-the-shelf HP laser printers, all running off Unix, SEO, Motorola, etc. Servers. We could dial into their setup and remote control the software, apply updates, etc. One day I get a call from this woman who insisted that the terminal she was using was broken. I called into their system and could see that the terminal wasn't connected at the moment, so I stepped through her, making sure that it was plugged in. She insisted absolutely that it was plugged in, turned on, and the light was on and everything. After running through all the possibilities that I could think of, she was still adamant that I come out and replace the terminal since it was clearly broken. I was hesitant to make the trip since it was 225 kilometers away and would require about 5 or 6 hours of my day to make the round trip, traffic, and a lot of snow. But my boss told me to make sure these customers were kept happy. I grabbed a new terminal out of the storage closet, some extra cabling in case it was just a bad serial cable, and my tools and headed out on the trip. At least I got paid enough per kilometer that it was well worth it. It took me about 3 hours to get there, and the woman is just steamed. I walk in the door, set my bag down, look at the wall, where the power cord is clearly not plugged into the wall itself. I picked up the cable, plugged it in, and lo and behold, the terminal turned on and the login prompt comes up. I looked at her and she tells me that she tried that. I was literally in the office for less than 60 seconds. And since the call was not actually our problem, they got billed for the 6-hour service call in full, and I got 450 kilometers of mileage. at like 25 cents per kilometer, was way more than the gas and maintenance on my old 86 Honda Accord cost me. Cue the same woman 8 days later. She's on the phone to me screaming that my fix didn't work at all and that the terminal was broken again and that I needed to replace the faulty terminal right now. I asked her if the terminal was plugged into the wall because remember last week when I came out and it wasn't plugged in? Are you absolutely sure? She was absolutely sure. Sigh, another 3-hour drive down there, walk in the door, and what do I see? The power cable is clearly laying on the floor again. I asked her if she saw that it was unplugged. She told me that she isn't technical and that I should have made sure that it was done right last time. I plugged it back in and guess what? It worked! Huzzah! She was still mad because it shouldn't be happening this much. Not sure how I was supposed to make that happen. I grabbed my bag, but before I left, I noticed that the small company had gotten a new receptionist. I guessed before that they didn't have one, so I stopped and chatted for a bit, asked her if she knew anything about what's going on with the plug to the terminal. She didn't have a clue, but she would keep an eye out for me. Made in another 10 days before I get another call from the lady again. I tell her I was on a service call, but I'd call her back in 5 minutes. A quick call to the receptionist where she said that the lady had her little nephews in the room, so she ran and checked that the terminal was unplugged for me. It was. She plugged it back in, and when I called back to the lady, she said it was working again, but was still weary that it was going to go out. I told her that if it fails again, have her receptionist call me so she won't have to wait, and I can perform a reset of the connection remotely, a new feature, and get her up and running in 2 minutes. I never had to make another in-person service call to that location again. I sent the receptionist a big box of Bernard Callebaut chocolates for Xmas. That receptionist is the true MVP of this story. In a story like this, it's nice to have at least one person you can rely on. That's more than most people get. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.